Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's go. The night market. I'll never forget the night I first saw the market. I wasn't supposed to be out that late, not on a school night, and definitely not in the alleys behind the old downtown district. But curiosity and boredom have a way of leading you to places you don't belong. It started with the faint sound of music. Not the thumping bass or pop songs you'd hear from a passing car, but something soft, haunting. A melody that seemed to tug at something deep inside me. I'd been biking home from my friend Nolan's house after a late study session. Normally, I would have stuck to the main roads, but for some reason, I turned down a side alley near the old train depot. That's when I saw it. The alley, usually empty and dark, was glowing with warm golden light. Stalls lined the narrow passageway, draped in fabrics of every color imaginable. Lanterns hung overhead, casting strange, flickering shadows. At first, I thought it was some kind of festival I hadn't heard about. But as I got closer, I realized there was something off about it. The vendors weren't like anyone I'd ever seen. Some looked human, at least at first glance, but their movements were too fluid, their eyes too bright. Others were unmistakably not human. A tall figure with shimmering scales, a hunched woman with too many fingers, a man whose face seemed to shift every time I blinked. "Welcome to the night market," said a voice to my left. I turned to see a woman sitting behind a small stall, her eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. "First time?" I nodded, my throat dry. She smiled, revealing teeth that were sharp and too white. "You'll find things here you can't get anywhere else. Just be careful what you ask for." The market was overwhelming. Each stall seemed to offer something stranger than the last. One vendor sold bottles filled with swirling light, claiming they were stolen moments of happiness. Another offered tiny vials of liquid labeled courage, luck, and love. "Just a sip," the vendor crooned, his voice like honey. "One sip, and your life changes forever." I kept walking. Further down, I saw a stall where someone was selling old photographs, each one showing a moment that hadn't happened yet. A woman held one up, her hands trembling. It showed her standing on a beach, holding the hand of a little boy who looked just like her. "How much?" she whispered. "The price is steep," the vendor replied, his voice cold. "But worth it, wouldn't you agree?" I should have turned around. I should have left right then and there. But something about the market drew me in. It felt alive, pulsing with a strange energy that made it impossible to leave. Then I saw the stall. It was tucked away at the very end of the alley, almost hidden in the shadows. Unlike the others, it was simple. A plain wooden table with a single item resting on top. A small, intricately carved box. Behind the table sat a man in a dark coat. His face was pale, his features sharp and angular. He looked up as I approached, and for a moment his eyes seemed to flash with something unearthly. "You're interested," he said, his voice soft. It wasn't a question. "What is it?" I asked, pointing to the box. He smiled faintly. "A very special item. It shows you what you want most." "How much?" His smile widened. "The price isn't money, it's potential." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "Years of your life?" he said simply. 5, to be exact. I hesitated. It sounded ridiculous, but then again, everything about this place was ridiculous. Still, something about the box called to me. "Fine," I said. The moment I handed over the payment, a strange, cold sensation that swept through my body. The man pushed the box toward me. "Open it when you're ready," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. I left the market in a daze, the box tucked under my arm. By the time I reached the end of the alley, the market was gone. The stalls, the lights, the music, everything had vanished as if it had never been there. I didn't open the box right away. I told myself it was because I didn't believe in any of it, but the truth was, I was scared. It wasn't until the next night, alone in my room, that I finally worked up the nerve. The box was heavier than it looked, its surface covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift under the light. I hesitated for a moment, then lifted the lid. At first, I saw nothing, but then a faint mist began to rise from the box, swirling in the air before forming into a picture. It was me, older, standing in a sleek office. I was wearing an expensive suit, holding a framed photo of a family. My family. It was everything I'd ever wanted: success, happiness, stability. But then the image began to change. The office darkened, the walls cracking and crumbling. The family photo turned to ash in my hands. And then, from the shadows, something emerged. A figure with glowing eyes and a sharp, predatory grin. It looked directly at me and whispered, "You shouldn't have taken it." The box snapped shut, the mist disappearing as quickly as it had come. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I tried to forget about it, but over the next few days, strange things started happening. I'd catch glimpses of that figure in reflective surfaces, in the bathroom mirror, the glass of a store window, even the screen of my phone. And then the dreams started. Every night, I'd find myself back in the night market, surrounded by its strange vendors and haunting whispers. The man in the dark coat was always there, watching me with a knowing smile. I tried to return the box, to find the market again, but no matter how many times I went back to that alley, it was gone. The figure began appearing more frequently, its presence growing stronger. It would whisper things, dark, horrible things about my future, about what I'd traded away. And then one night, it spoke clearly for the first time. "You belong to us now." I don't know how much time I have left. The box still sits on my desk, its surface as pristine as the day I bought it. Sometimes I wonder if I should open it again, to see what's waiting for me. But deep down, I know the truth. The night market never gives without taking, and it always collects its debts. The last passenger. Driving for a rideshare service was supposed to be my side hustle, a quick way to make some extra cash on weekends while I finished school. The hours were flexible, and I didn't mind the solitude of cruising around the city at night. But after what happened last month, I've barely been able to sit behind the wheel without glancing nervously in my rearview mirror. My name's Miles, and I don't scare easily. At least, that's what I used to think. It was a quiet Thursday night, and I'd been driving for hours. The downtown rush had long since died down, and I was about to call it quits when a new request popped up on my app. The pickup was at an address on the outskirts of town, just past the industrial district. Normally, I avoided those areas late at night. The streets were dark, and cell service could be spotty, but the fare was good, and I figured it would be my last ride for the evening. When I arrived, the street was eerily quiet. A single streetlight flickered above me, casting long shadows across the empty road. I glanced at the app again to double-check the address. The pin dropped me in front of a run-down building that looked abandoned. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the breeze. I was about to cancel the ride when I saw someone step out of the shadows. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in a dark coat that seemed too big for their frame. A hood obscured most of their face, but I could see the glint of pale skin beneath it. They didn't wave or acknowledge me, just walked straight toward the car and got into the back seat without a word. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're going to..." I glanced at the app. The destination was just listed as Northside Cemetery. "Is that right?" I asked, turning slightly to look at them. The passenger nodded but didn't speak. Their presence felt strange. The air in the car seemed colder, and the faint smell of damp earth lingered. I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe they were just shy or having a bad night. As I drove, the silence became unbearable. "So, do you live out there?" I asked, glancing in the mirror. The passenger didn't respond. They were staring out the window, their face hidden in the shadows. "Okay then," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The ride was only supposed to take about 15 minutes, but the roads felt longer than usual. The streetlights grew sparser, and soon we were surrounded by darkness. The GPS directed me onto a narrow, winding road lined with trees. My headlights barely pierced the gloom, and every turn felt like it led deeper into nowhere. When I glanced in the rearview mirror again, my stomach dropped. The passenger was staring directly at me. Their face was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed too large for their head. They didn't blink or move, just stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Almost there," I said, my voice cracking slightly. The cemetery appeared suddenly, the wrought iron gates looming out of the darkness like the entrance to another world. The app chirped, signaling we'd arrived. I stopped the car and turned around, ready to tell the passenger we were here. But the back seat was empty. I froze, my heart pounding. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't felt the car shift as they got out. The seatbelt was still buckled, and the door locks were still engaged. Swallowing hard, I stepped out of the car and looked around. The cemetery was silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the cold night air. I shined my phone's flashlight around, but there was no sign of the passenger. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. I climbed back into the car, locking the doors behind me. My hands were shaking as I ended the ride on the app and started driving back toward town. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even as I drove through well-lit streets. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the passenger sitting there again. When I finally got home, I parked the car and sat in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of what had happened. I convinced myself it was just a weird prank or a misunderstanding. But the next night, things got even stranger. I picked up a young couple from a bar downtown. They were chatty and tipsy, laughing and joking as we drove. "You wouldn't believe the story we heard last night," the woman said, leaning forward. "About a creepy rideshare driver." "Oh," I said, forcing a laugh. "Not the driver," her boyfriend corrected. "The passenger. Supposedly there's this guy who shows up in rideshares late at night. He never talks, and when he gets out, he disappears. People say he's some kind of ghost or something." My blood ran cold. "That's just an urban legend," I said quickly. "Maybe," the woman said, grinning. "But the creepy part is, they say if you pick him up, he marks you. Weird stuff starts happening after." The next few nights, I couldn't shake the paranoia. Every passenger felt like a potential threat, every shadow like a lurking figure. Then came the messages. It started with a notification on the rideshare app, an unfamiliar name requesting a ride. The pickup location? The cemetery. I ignored it, but the requests kept coming, each one from a different account. And then the calls started. At first, I thought it was just prank calls, static on the other end, or the faint sound of whispering. But one night, I heard a voice. "You can't escape." I dropped the phone, my heart pounding. It's been weeks since I stopped driving. The app is uninstalled. My car sits unused in the driveway, but I still feel like I'm being followed. Sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps outside my window. And every now and then, when I glance in a mirror or a darkened window, I swear I see someone sitting in the back seat of my car, watching me. The dollhouse. The day we moved into the old Victorian house on Willow Lane, it felt like stepping into another era. The floors creaked with every step. The banisters were carved with intricate patterns, and the attic, oh, the attic, was a treasure trove of forgotten items from past owners. I was only 9 years old at the time, and moving to a new house felt like an adventure. My parents, Grace and Peter, had spent months searching for the perfect place, and this house, with its towering gables and ivy-covered walls, seemed like a dream. The first few days were spent unpacking and exploring. The attic quickly became my favorite spot. It was filled with dusty trunks, old books, and mysterious knickknacks. One afternoon, while rummaging through a pile of boxes, I found it, a dollhouse. The dollhouse was exquisite, like something out of a fairy tale. It was about 3 feet tall, with intricate details that made it look almost alive. Each shingle on the roof was perfectly aligned. The windows had tiny glass panes, and the front door even had a miniature brass knocker. But what struck me the most was how familiar it looked. "Mom!" I called out, dragging the heavy dollhouse into the light. "Look at this!" Grace appeared in the doorway, brushing her hands on her apron. She tilted her head, examining the dollhouse with a curious expression. "Wow, that's beautiful," she said, crouching down beside me. "It looks just like our house." She was right. Every detail matched. The bay windows in the living room, the wraparound porch, even the little swing set in the backyard. "Can I keep it in my room?" I asked, already envisioning where it would go. "Of course," Grace said with a smile. That night, after my dad helped me carry the dollhouse to my room, I began exploring it more closely. Each room was a perfect replica of our home. The kitchen had tiny pots and pans. The living room had a miniature sofa and fireplace, and even my bedroom was there, complete with a little bed and a desk. Inside the dollhouse were small wooden dolls. They weren't painted, just plain wood carvings, but they were unmistakably meant to represent us. There was a man with broad shoulders and a woman with long hair tied in a bun, just like Grace often wore. There was even a smaller doll with short hair, wearing a carved dress, me. I was thrilled. But as the days went on, my excitement turned to unease. It started a week later. I noticed something strange when I was playing with the dollhouse. The dolls were no longer where I had left them. At first, I thought I was just forgetful. Maybe I had moved them and didn't remember. But then it happened again. One morning, I found the doll representing my dad lying on the floor of the dollhouse's living room. His arm was raised, as if he was shielding himself from something. The next day, the doll of my mom was in the kitchen, her head tilted unnaturally to the side. "Have you been moving the dolls?" I asked my parents over breakfast. They both shook their heads, amused by my question. "It's probably just your imagination," Grace said. But it wasn't. Things escalated quickly after that. One evening, I noticed a new doll in the house. A small figure with long, wiry arms and legs. Its head was oversized, with no discernible features except for 2 hollow indentations where eyes should have been. I didn't know where it had come from. At first, I thought my parents might have found it and added it to the set as a joke. But when I asked them, they insisted they hadn't touched the dollhouse. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a whisper. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the dollhouse. In the dream, the new doll was moving, its long limbs jerking unnaturally as it crept through the tiny rooms. Over the next few days, more dolls appeared, 3 in total. Each one was grotesque, with exaggerated features that seemed to mock human form. One morning, I found all the dolls gathered in the attic of the dollhouse, including the ones that represented my family. The new dolls were towering over them, their gnarled hands reaching out as if to grab them. I tried to tell my parents, but they brushed it off as childish imagination. "You're just getting carried away," my dad said. "It's just a toy." But I knew it wasn't just a toy. One night, I woke up to a strange sound, a faint tapping, like tiny hands knocking against wood. My heart pounded as I turned on my bedside lamp. The dollhouse was in its usual spot, but something was different. The tiny front door was open. I crept closer, every nerve in my body screaming for me to stop. Inside the dollhouse, the new dolls were no longer in the attic. They were in the living room, their heads turned toward the front door. And the dolls that represented my family, they were gone. The next morning, I found scratches on my bedroom floor, small parallel lines leading from the dollhouse to my bed. That was the final straw. I begged my dad to get rid of the dollhouse. He hesitated at first, but eventually agreed after seeing how upset I was. We took it back up to the attic and left it there, covered with an old sheet. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The night after we moved the dollhouse, I woke to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth across the attic. I pulled the covers over my head, trembling as the sound continued. The next morning, I found something on my desk. A small wooden figure, carved in the shape of a child. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its tiny hands were reaching out, as if begging for help. I don't live in that house anymore. My family moved out less than a year later, though I never told them the full extent of what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint tapping of tiny hands against wood. And I can't help but wonder if the dollhouse is still in that attic, waiting for its next owner. Thanks for listening. Bloody subscribe and stay with us, unless you'd rather face your nightmares alone. Good night.